talk to an empty room. This is so weird, guys. So weird. With that being said, we do have our USBE staff here, so I guess it's not completely empty. It's just all of the school specialists that are here today. But I just want to do some housekeeping. So for those of you that are online, which is all of you, I hope this is very entertaining for you sitting at your desks or even at home in your pajamas. Very jealous of you. But with that being said, please use the chat to ask any questions. I'm going to have Isabella here. She's going to read the questions for me when we get to those times that are breaks to answer questions. So feel free to enter them into the chat at any moment, anytime, not a big deal. We'll get to those questions at that time when we have our breaks. Quick staff introductions because nobody's here. Guys, this is going to be quite the recording. We do have our new specialists here with us, Christy and Cassie. I think you can maybe see them, maybe not, I don't know. Lindsay, Rachel, and Kaisa. For those of you that didn't know, Sydney Hansen is no longer at USBE due to her own choices. That sounded really bad. Let me rephrase that. Her husband got a really great job opportunity in California and they moved to California. That really sounded awful there. Didn't think that through. So we are also in the process of hiring for another specialist to replace Sydney at this time. So if you know of anybody or want to join our team, look out for that job post. Okay, training opportunities. We do have September 1st, USDA Foods monthly update. So please attend that. That is online and virtual. School specialists, you don't have to stay down here. You're fine. Thanks. We also have on September 8th, our school nutrition new director's open office hours. So that is exactly how it sounds. It's going to be an open office hour for individuals where they can ask kind of a little bit more in-depth questions. Please go through NSLP Central with all of the materials that we have to look over any trainings. We also have September 30th, which is going to be our verification training, and fall conference is going to be September 28th and 29th. An email went out about that not too long ago that you can already start signing up for fall conference, so please look at that. All right, we're going to get into it. I do want to have one item to note. I do want to recognize that life happens. We can be flexible. What this means is we have already been reaching out to you about getting your on-site scheduled for administrative reviews. If you have not responded to the specialist that's reached out to you about that, please respond back to them so that we can get those dates solidified. Please let us know if a date picked for the review no longer works due to illness, emergencies, etc., and we can push it to a different day or week. But this is just that it is extenuating circumstances. So essentially what has happened in the past that we didn't know with a director has happened several times of where there has been like a death in the family or they've been diagnosed with an illness and they need to adjust it. As long as the review has not been opened and you have not received your open notification, then we can adjust that time. We can maybe push it to another year if needs be, depending on the circumstance. So please just be communicating with your assigned specialist about that if we need to make an adjustment. But once a review is open, that means you have received your notification letter, then it must be completed in that program year. So once it's open, we can't close it until we've gone through the entire process. So I did want you guys to know that, but we're not monsters. If something happens, we understand life. So please let us know and just open communication. Okay. All right. So today's plan, we're just going to identify the areas subject to the review. So meaning what we look at on an administrative review and discuss those program requirements for each of those areas. All of you should have received an email along with you signing up to attend this now virtual presentation as I stand in a very awkward empty room at USBE. But you have received also a video that should have been your pre-work. That pre-work video, it's about 10 minutes, it's a little bit longer than that, but it talked about the timeline of events. So it talks about when you receive your notification, it talks about when due dates are for documentation, what it looks like in terms of corrective action and all of those due dates and how long a review actually takes. We're not going to go over that today. That was your homework. If you did not do that, that's okay for right now, but please make sure that you do watch that video if you haven't already. Again, you received it in an email and it's a little over 10 minutes, so not too long. First and foremost, we're going to talk about what an administrative review actually is. It's required by the Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act of 2010. So it is in regulation. This is code of federal regulation. There's nothing we can do about it. It's from USDA. And we're required to do so. What that means is we are required to review sponsors at least once within a cycle. We are currently in our second year of our 5-year cycle right now. But what that means when we say at least, if you become high risk, if your review has egregious findings, we will then have to do a follow-up review on you. It also does not mean that we review you once every 5 years. You can be any time within that cycle. You just happen to be scheduled for year 2 this year. The program review is determining compliance with the National School Lunch Program, the School Breakfast Program, the After School Snack Program, the Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program, Seamless Summer Option, and Special Milk Program. From here on out, I will be using those acronyms: NSLP, SBP, ASP, FFEP, SSO, and SNP. Welcome to federal programs and education, where we love acronyms, right? With that being said, what program areas are covered in an administrative review? We have kind of all of these columns to indicate and show what we're really looking at as an overview. So this is a broad overview of what we're looking at with programs covered in the administrative review. So we have our meal access and reimbursement. This is looking at eligibility and applications. It's looking at your verification. And it's also looking at your counting and claiming of meals, these procedures that you have here. Then we move over and look at meal pattern and nutritional quality. These are your meal components, your component quantities, if you're doing offer versus serve correctly, and your dietary specifications, right? This is all about your menus and the food that you're serving. Is it reimbursable meals, right? And then over here is your eligibility, benefit issuance, applications, verification, all of that, and your claiming processes to make sure that you're claiming appropriately. Okay, if you notice, these two involve money, right? This is performance standard 1, you might hear that, and performance standard 2. These are very critical areas of your review. Review findings in this area may and probably will result in fiscal action. So I'm putting that out there. I'm going to remind you several times throughout this presentation of what is subject to fiscal action. So critical areas. And then we move over to our resource management. If you're unfamiliar with that term, it's the financial management of your program, of the National School Lunch Program. So we are going to look at the maintenance of nonprofit school food service account, paid lunch equity, which we will actually do for you and the state agency does do for you on an annual basis, your non-program food revenue, and then we look at indirect costs. Yes, Isabella.
When you're pointing, you can't really see online. So if you can like point with your mouse, maybe.
Gotcha. Thank you for the feedback. Okay, so we're now going to use my mouse instead of me walking around an empty room. It's fine, guys. It's all about working in government, right? You got to pivot when you need to. All right, so what I just talked about was your resource management here, and talking about your financial management of the nonprofit food service account. So your maintenance, right? Maintenance means, guys, we have somebody that entered our room. We're very excited. I'm no longer just talking to USBE. All right, so we were talking about the maintenance. So, right, your net cash resources. We're going to go into depth in this. Your paid lunch equity, which the state agency does for you on an annual basis, your non-program food revenue, and then your indirect cost. What I was talking about earlier, so kind of with my mouse to kind of show you, your performance standard one is this meal access and reimbursement. That's your applications verification and your claiming procedures, right? It involves funding, involves money with reimbursement, making sure that you're claiming students appropriately. And then you have your performance standard two, which is your meal pattern and nutritional quality. So your meal components, making sure that your component quantities that you're offering reimbursed meals, students are taking reimbursable meals, and that you're meeting your dietary specifications. Okay, that's like sodium limits, kind of all of that, sugars. Again, we're going to talk in depth about this. This is the overview. Then we have our general areas. More than likely, your general areas will not result in a fiscal action if you have a finding in these areas. I say that loosely because with after school snack program and special milk program, what happens is there dips into that eligibility, and it also dips into that counting and claiming and your meal components. So you have to think about that as well. But we do look at your civil rights. Did you take your annual training? We look at on-site monitoring. So if you have more than one site under your SFA, then you need to be doing on-site monitoring. Your local school wellness policy, we look at that. Smart snacks in schools, professional standards, water, food safety, all of your record keeping, and then looking at your outreach. And then we look at the other federal programs. So after school snack, FFEP, Seamless Summer, which those of you that operate Seamless Summer should have already received your Seamless Summer review this past current summer, so a couple of months ago. If you decide to do Seamless Summer next summer and you didn't do it previously, we will then have to review that Seamless Summer option. And then your special milk program if you were operating special milk. Okay. We're going to get right into it about what we look at with meal access and reimbursement. Okay. So we're looking at eligibility applications. These are your free and reduced applications and your direct certification. So the first thing that we're looking at and what we're reviewing with your documentation is, are applications approved and denied correctly? This includes your system. Okay. We're making sure that you have your correct income eligibility guidelines or IEGs that you're using, right? They reset every year. The federal government determines poverty levels as they look through inflation and whatnot, right? They have a whole calculation. This is not determined by Utah or me. This is determined at the federal level, right? In the federal registry. So income eligibility guidelines run from July 1 to June 30. So you'd want to make sure that you're using your correct income eligibility guidelines. If you are unsure, we have sent an email about that. It's also posted on NSLP Central of the most current ones, or a link to the federal registry. We're also looking at your required timeframes for processing those applications. Okay, there is a requirement about your operations in processing applications. Once you receive a free and reduced application, you need to process it within 10 days, and that's 10 operating days. So we look at that documentation, make sure that you're doing it within that time frame. Okay, we look at your notifications. Do those meet requirements? You have notifications, right, that you send out of either approval and what their new status is. If you've denied their application, right, we're going to double check and make sure of that. If they're directly certified, we look at that notification because there are requirements that need to be in those notifications. Those requirements can be found in the eligibility manual that's in NSLP Central. Okay. Are files maintained properly? You are required to maintain your files for 3 years plus current year. So that means kind of essentially 4 years that you're holding on to all of your documentation. If you receive an application, for instance, and you also notice that they are directly certified, you still have to hold on to that application. You just need to dictate and make a note somewhere within your records that they are also directly certified, but you still have to keep that application on file. Okay. So we're making sure that you're maintaining those files properly. Are they kept in a safe, secured space, right? If you're using a system only, like a software system to do everything, do only the necessary individuals have logins for that? Not everybody and anybody can go in and look up a student's eligibility status and profile, okay? Also, do you backdate and is it done properly, right? It is up to the SFA to choose if you backdate for your applications. That is not a must. That is completely up to you. However, if you have decided to backdate with your applications, we're going to ensure that you've done it properly. What that means is that you are doing it for direct cert and applications. You're doing it for all. You're not picking and choosing because that could become a civil rights issue, right? If you do it for one, you do it for all. Now, when it's applications, so a free and reduced application, income application, what that looks like is you're backdating to the date that you received the application, not when it was approved. Okay, and then for direct certification, you are backdating to the date of eligibility for the federal assistance program that they are receiving. So it identifies in SNP Web on that list that you pull from direct certification, right, the date of eligibility. Most of them are going to say July 1. You can date it back to July 1. If your system won't allow you to do that, you backdate it to the beginning of the school year. However your system looks for that, you need to figure it out, but that's what backdating looks like, okay? Not when you pull the list and approve them for direct cert. All right. Then we're also going to look, does your system contain the required information? So does it provide the eligibility date? So when was the student eligible for free or reduced price meals? How were they approved? Were they directly certified? And by what program that they were directly certified? So SNAP, TANF, FDPIR, Medicaid free, Medicaid reduced, homeless migrant runaway from a list of your liaison, right? We're looking at that as well as are they free and reduced via income application? Okay, so we're looking at all of that information. Does it have the student's first and last name, etc.? Okay, and when I say system, that means your software system, electronic system if you're doing applications, and if you're still doing it manually, that's still a system. Okay, it's your process of your maintaining all of that information. All right. For those of you that are CEP or Provision 2 SFA wide, that means your entire district or your entire charter is CEP or Provision 2 in a non-base year. I want to specify this, right? For Provision 2, if you're in your base year, you're still receiving applications and direct certification. So this slide is only for those that are CEP, Community Eligibility Provision, or Provision 2 in a non-base year. For those LEAs that are that case, eligibility questions and verification questions will disappear. That is because you're not receiving applications. You don't have to do verification. The state agency, that's what SA means. State agency checks documentation of approval and the claiming percentages of those provisions, but it shortens your review a ton. So if you are not on Provision 2 or CEP, check this year on if you can, because it's super awesome. Okay, those of you that are residential childcare institutions or RCCIs, without day students, the same thing applies. The eligibility questions and verification questions will disappear for you because you're not receiving income applications if you are an RCCI without day students. But the state agency is going to check your intake forms for student information, that you are correctly gathering the information of your students, making sure the age, birth date, kind of all of that information. So we will double check your intake forms just to ensure that we are looking at enrollment properly for the RCCI. We're going to move into counting and claiming, but before I do that, I realize I am talking extremely fast and moving forward. Is my pace okay? Okay, for those of you that are here in person, yes, great. Online, is my pace okay? All right, thanks for the thumbs up. I appreciate you. Okay. So we're going to move forward with counting and claiming. We look at, do you have a clear process with your counting and claiming? That means, is there edit checks within your system? Do you have assigned personnel responsibilities with that process? Okay. We're looking at, does everybody know their responsibility? Does everybody know whose responsibility it is? Who is printing off the daily report? Who's gathering the information? Right? What reports are you looking at to check against the day versus monthly counts and that you are having an edit check within your process? It is a federal requirement, meaning it is in the 7 CFR 210 that you have to have an edit check within your process of counting and claiming. Okay, so you as an SFA will need to identify what that edit check is to us as the state agency when we are reviewing your documentation, okay? We're gonna ask and look at, are you claiming meals properly by eligibility status? So if you are operating the traditional national school lunch program and school breakfast program, we are looking at, are you claiming by free, reduced, and paid? And what does that look like within your system and your process? Are you doing that properly? You're not putting in all of your total end of day counts into the free column because you know you're going to get more federal reimbursement that way, right? That's what we're looking at. Not that I think any of you would be that nefarious in any way, shape, or form, except for those that are CEP in provision 2 in a non-base year when you are just entering in your total counts. But that's not in the free column. It's in its own special column that says total meals. Being alone in a room, I can't gauge if people are getting my humor, and this is difficult for those of you that are online, which is everybody else. Man. Okay. With that being said, do you maintain all information used to reclaim? Thank you for the laugh. I appreciate it. Okay.
Thanks.
Guys, yes, more of this. More reactions. Then I can know you're not asleep and it's in the background and you're taking a nap. All right. Yes. Thank you. I appreciate you all. All right. Do you maintain all information used for claiming? So are you using your daily counts that you're printing off or saving, right? When I say print off, that doesn't necessarily mean you actually have to have like a full paper document of it. That means you're just saving your daily count report somewhere. Okay, so whether that is on your server, or that's on your desktop, if you feel better about printing it off and putting it in a file folder, great. But are you using all of that information, your daily counts? Are you using your monthly summary report? Do you have an edit check where you look at those two together at the end of the month when you're putting in your claim in Primero Edge? Or CMP Web if you were SSO, but we're gonna not talk about CMP Web, just like we don't talk about Bruno. Thank you. That was really funny. Haha. All right. With that being said, thank you. Thank you for the reactions, everybody at home. All right. So do you use your production records? So are you looking at your total meals that were on your production records and then also looking at your daily reports, your monthly reports? Are those kind of in fact, do they look similar? Your documentation for eligibility changes. We know that happens, right? That there is a new student that comes in or somebody comes in direct cert throughout the middle of the month. You decide to backdate. So at the time they took a meal, they were paid status. And then because you backdated, now you can claim them as free or reduced, right? We understand those eligibility shifts. You just need to explain it to us. Okay, so whatever that documentation looks like, if that's a handwritten note on your daily print of had a student change from paid to reduced, so then you can see that difference in your monthly report, your monthly summary report, that is perfection. Okay, that's chef's kiss, right? If you have a log of how you do that, wonderful. We just need to have an explanation for when we do see those eligibility shifts, okay? Or, for instance, you have to have a void meal or any added meals, right? How many of you, which I know everybody has, had a parent call in and say, I was charged a meal and my student was not there that day. I don't understand why I was charged a meal. Or they complain a ton about something and you are good at your customer service and you're like, I will take that meal off. Don't worry about it. Okay, that happens often. Make a note of it. We understand that. We just need to know, why is there a difference from that day to your monthly report? Okay, so whatever that looks like, if it's on a Post-it note that you staple, right? Handwritten note, if you have a separate log. These are all really great suggestions. If you don't do this already, I am telling you what you should be doing, okay? All right, and then also your field trip count sheets. More often than not, we see a ton of error on field trip count sheets, and that's kind of just dependent upon how your process is and what documentation you are or are not keeping. So make sure that your field trip process is like solid, and you know for a surety kids are getting reimbursable meals and you know how to count and claim them, okay? It's not enough to just say you had 35 kids on a field trip on your production records. You also need to know what kid took a reimbursable meal and ensure that it's a reimbursable meal, right? And follow through with that process.
You know how those are supposed to be done, like point of service as it's actually served? Can you do those at the end of the day as the sheet comes back, or do they need to be done before they go? Because we have a manual sheet that the instructor or whoever's taking them on, and then I write down what I sent, and then they write down who took a meal.
Yeah.
And then we enter those in. Sometimes it's either at the very end of the day.
Totally fine. As long as you have that follow through process and you can explain that process to us when we're there on site. So it sounds like what you're doing is great, right? That you're just, as long as you're ensuring that a reimbursable meal is taken, you have that documentation and then you're entering it in. If it has to be the next morning, just because your staff is already gone by the time the teachers come back from the field trip and they're putting it in your box that you pick up the next day and enter it into the system, that's totally fine if that is your process. You just need to explain it to us, okay? And then have that supporting documentation. All right. Verification process. Those of you that do verification, which means the majority of you, we're going to look at is the correct number of applications selected and verified. Okay, we know that this was an issue last year, especially because of Primero Edge, right? It was all new to you, especially the way that you were importing that information, right? In the previous years, we were very kind to you in terms of how the state agency would ask that information. And then we would take your information and we would actually put it into the FNS report. Now we are asking you with Primero Edge that you're just putting in your information into the FNS report. FNA, they changed. So FNA report. So with that being said, right, I know that this looks different. This is year 2. So I'm really going to suggest and promote that verification training that is going to be on September 30th through our office, right? You will receive a link because it'll be online. You'll receive a link to join via Zoom. It will be recorded. Please watch it. Please pay attention. We're going to go through all of those steps. We took a lot of feedback from last year on what we need to do to try and help serve you guys this year so that it goes better. But we're looking at, did you do the correct number of applications that are selected and verified? If you do more applications than is necessary, it is an error. This is going to be one of those times that doing overwork actually is detrimental to you. Okay, so you really want to ensure that you're doing the correct number of applications. We're going to look at, did a confirmation review take place? So we're going to look at your signatures. So do you have a verifying official? Do you have a confirming official? Are those two separate people that are looking at the application? Everyone is required to do a confirmation review. So please make sure that you have that within your process. And again, gonna plug that September 30 training that we're gonna do on verification. So please watch that. Again, is your proper timeline maintained? That means all activities are done by November 15th. That means you are completely done with verification. So if it is November 15th, you haven't gotten any documentation, you've done your follow-up with a household that you haven't gotten anything back from them, that means on November 15th, you are sending them a letter letting them know that their benefits are no longer there and the reason why, right? The proper notification is being sent to them, identifying. So everything's got to be done and completed by November 15th. That does not mean your report to the state agency needs to be in by the 15th. We will have a deadline for that of what needs to be imported into Primero Edge. But your process for verification needs to be done by November 15th, okay? All right, again, we're also looking at our files maintained properly. So do you have all of your notifications? They're kept, the original application and all the income information that you received from the household that was selected for verification. We will need to look at originals. Okay, there is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. We will need to look at it. If it's all through via email on a software system, then you just need to show us that documentation so we can go through and look at that. If you can get us your verification materials ahead of time, that is more beneficial. The less documentation we have to look at on site, that means the shorter amount of time we are on site and in your hair. I'm sure you would much rather us do all the paperwork on our own at our lovely cubicle upstairs at USBE or at home on our at-home days, rather than us spending 5 days at your location. If you are a larger district, sorry, sucks to be you. We're going to be there 5 days no matter what. You know, it just is what it is with your observations and how many schools we have to look at. Does CEP or Provision 2 need to complete verification? No, only Provision 2 in a base year must complete verification. So again, if you are, sorry, Brock. So if you are CEP, that means district or charter wide, and Provision 2 in a non-base year, district or charter wide, you do not have to complete verification. Same thing if you are a RCCI without day students, you don't have to do verification because you're not accepting applications, right? So Provision 2 in a base year, you're accepting applications, therefore you must complete verification. All right, meal access and reimbursement. So I want to reiterate and remind you, findings in these areas are subject to fiscal action. So extensive findings in this area may qualify you as a high risk moving forward. If you are determined as high risk, that means we have to do a follow-up review with you, okay? What this means is it's very egregious findings. This is going to mean over 10% of our sample size of applications we looked at were not done properly. Okay, that means you were using the wrong income eligibility guidelines. You don't have any documentation to prove how you certified a household with free reduced eligibility, kind of those like really big offsets. That's what we mean by extensive findings. The term in federal programs, we use egregious findings. Okay, we will notify you when we're starting to see this. Okay, you are not going to be shocked and surprised by it of like out of nowhere, you owe us money. That's what fiscal action means. Okay, we will let you know what we are seeing as we go throughout the process. That's why communication with your assigned specialist or your assigned reviewer or lead reviewer is very important. Okay, but we will update you as we're seeing things happen. But we just want to put it out in the clear. Findings in this area are subject to fiscal action. Okay. We're going to move on to meal pattern and nutritional quality. So we're looking at meal components and quantities. So are your production records complete? Does it contain all the required information and is it filled out daily? Okay. So we need to see the story of what has happened in your meal service for breakfast and for lunch and also after school snack if you're doing after school snack program. We need to see how much did you prepare? What components are you preparing? Do you do offer versus serve? What age grade group level are you serving and preparing for? How many are actually served? What are you doing with leftovers, right? We need to see all of that information. If you were unaware of what your production record must contain, there's a really great resource on NSLP Central that talks about production records and your meal components. So go in and look at that and make sure that you do have all the required components on your production record, okay? But we need to see the story of what did you plan for that day and how does it meet that age grade group, right? And then how much did you prepare? How much did you serve? What did you do with your leftovers? Okay. This is also a common finding that we see very often is especially your milk type. Many just say milk, and we have a ton because we have a huge fridge over here that's holding all of our milk cartons. We need to see, do you have 2 milk type varieties? And then how are you keeping track of the inventory to ensure that every child has access to a choice of milk? Okay. So that information needs to be there. If it just says milk variety, doesn't work for us. We need to see if it is 1% white milk, 1% chocolate milk, or strawberry milk, or my favorite, root beer. If you have orange, chef's kiss. Shout out to you. Thanks, Gosner. It's like an orange creamsicle that you drink if you've never had an orange milk. I am going to promote that. It's delightful. Unless you don't like an orange creamsicle, then you won't like it. And that's your problem and your taste buds are weird. But it's okay. I still love you. All right. Okay. Is an RS selected meal patterns followed? So is your production record saying that we are serving a K5 menu and I'm at an elementary that's K6? That's going to be a problem because then I'm going to ask you, where is your 6-8 meal pattern for those 6th graders? And then you're like, oh, actually I meant I'm doing K8. And I'm like, great, your documentation doesn't say that. So I can't actually ensure that's what you're planning on. So we're going to have some corrective action and we're going to figure this out and fix this. And then possibly take back some fiscal action. Don't want to do that. Just make sure that we are going through that. There's a question.
If we have white and flavored, does that work?
No. Sorry about it. You need to be specific about your milks. I know you don't like that answer, but we need to know what you have available. Yes.
Says we will fix it.
I didn't know that you had it wrong, Brock. Thanks for outing yourself. I appreciate you. Just kidding, your review hasn't started, so I don't need to take a note about that. It's just only in this recording that's going to be here forever and ever and ever.
We all know.
We all know now. Just kidding. Okay. Are you meeting the daily and weekly requirements? Okay. If you are familiar with the meal pattern in your age grade groups, which hopefully you are by this point, you need to ensure that you're meeting not only your daily requirements, but your weekly requirements, right? If you are unaware, right, when you think about a K through 5 meal pattern or a K8 meal pattern, if you are only doing 1 ounce of meat alternate a day and 1 ounce of whole grain rich requirement, you're actually not going to meet the weekly requirement. Okay. So we are looking at both. We're looking at, did you meet your daily? Did you meet the week? This also means your vegetable subgroups. Okay. So we will review an entire week menu in our review period, and we'll determine that by going through and doing our lovely process by getting all of your documentation from you. We'll credit everything. It's grand old time. Everybody loves it. They don't, but it's okay. I actually kind of like my job. It's quite fun. I love looking through documents. That's why I work in government. All right. And then do you maintain all of your proper documentation? Do you have your labels? So that means CN labels. Do you have your standardized recipes? Okay. All of that information that we're going to need. Along with that is offer versus serve. If you are participating in offer versus serve, is this implemented correctly? Okay. Does everybody at your point of service understand and know what a reimbursable meal is by offer versus serve? Okay. Do they know that if you are dealing with a special diet, offer versus serve is not okay, right? So if a student is lactose intolerant and you're like, it's okay, you just don't need to take a milk. Not appropriate. That's not what offer versus serve is for. It's for kids to have choice and options. Okay. So, are you meeting daily and weekly amounts that are being served? Are students taking those required amounts for a reimbursable meal? So are they taking 2 full components and at least a half cup of fruit and or vegetable is what we're looking at, okay? Is signage posted and doesn't meet those requirements? Signage needs to be posted at the beginning of the service line. It cannot be at the end. It has to be at the beginning of the service line. The question in our administrative review by USDA specifically states, is it posted at the beginning of the service line? So you need to make sure that if you're participating in offer versus serve, that you have signs at the beginning of the line stating what a student needs to take for a reimbursable meal, what offer versus serve looks like. Okay. Whatever that sign looks like, I don't care. It could be a white poster board with black Sharpie on it. It doesn't need to be pretty, but it needs to be there. Okay. We're also looking at your dietary specifications. You are going to be asked to fill out an assessment. We do an offsite of this, and then we ask the same questions on-site or through observation. It asks about your menu planning and meal service at a site. We only do this for one. It will determine if you are high risk or low risk. If you are high risk and it determines that as such, then we have to go through a full nutrient analysis of your menus rather than just checking your components. And if you're meeting those daily and weekly requirements, we will have to go in and do full nutrient analysis of sodium, sugars. Well, we're doing sugars because it's just product based right now. So that's still happening, but also your fats, calories. We'll look at all of that. Okay. If you do determine to be high risk for a site. It assesses the need to complete that. And then if you have vended meals, you may need to follow up with your vendor for some of that answers. That means if you have a food service management company, you're going to have to communicate with your food service management company to get this documentation possibly. Just as a heads up, if you didn't do your homework for your 10-minute video that you were supposed to watch before today, it talks about the communication between the state agency and your third-party vendors. That means state agency cannot talk directly with a food service management company. We cannot talk directly with if you have an agency that does your finances. We cannot talk with them directly. We can get called into a meeting with you guys to do so. So for instance, like if you were dealing with Red Apple, just one of those companies that comes to mind about like finances, we can't directly email back and forth with Red Apple. Like there has to be the go-between with the SFA. That's because our contract for you to operate this program is with you. It's not with that third-party vendor. Okay. So that's what we're talking about. If you have vended meals, you may need to follow up with your vendor for some of these answers. Because again, we can't directly reach out to them. Okay. All right, just a reminder, some final rule of those nutritional standards and updates. Milk can be served as fat-free or 1% unflavored milk. Also, prior changes have happened. You can actually now have whole milk. I did not update that. Sorry, my bad. You can now actually have 2% and whole milk via policy that came out last year. You do still need to keep in mind of the caloric intake and the sugars with those. But you can have those offered now. Again, you just need 2 different meal or milk types available to students. Then your sodium, we are still here at that current sodium limit. That is meaning this first column here for breakfast and for lunch. So this is in place through the end of this school year. After this school year, your sodium limits decrease in a reduction of 15% for lunch and 10% for breakfast. So hopefully, as you're dealing with all of your contracts now, industry has been aware of this. They should have been reformulating products. Make sure that you're having those conversations as you're doing that procurement, probably now for next year, right? You usually start very early in the year to start doing that. So just as a heads up on that, your whole grains, 80% of weekly grains must be whole grain rich. Prior to this, it used to be 100%. We're back to 80%. But look, if you're doing 100% whole grain rich and the kids aren't complaining, keep going at it. More power to you. Okay. Also with this is the updates that are coming up to match the new dietary guidelines for Americans that came out last year. So we have the added sugars piece. So starting July 1, 2025. So you've already been doing this for an entire year. This is a continuation that breakfast cereals may not have more than 6 grams of added sugar per dry ounce. So you need to be double checking your labels on that. We did find several cereals last year that had not met this requirement. So please make sure that you are double checking with the cereals that you are purchasing and offering to students. Your yogurt cannot have more than 12 grams of added sugars per 6 ounces. That means 2 grams of added sugar per 1 ounce. And again, added sugars. Your nutrition labels will say added sugars. Okay. And then your flavored milk may not have more than 10 grams of added sugar per 8 fluid ounces. Okay. Next year, you're going to start having weekly limits set for added sugars. So it's going to be no more than 10% of calories that come from added sugar in the National School Lunch Program and School Breakfast Program. So keep that in mind. Maybe start looking at your menus that you're serving this year and what you may need to adjust for next year. We'll probably be providing some of that technical assistance while we are there on site. If we're seeing anything that is kind of like high sugar and just kind of mentioning that, right? But right now you're still at just these product-based sugar limits. All right, there are some final rule flexibilities that have come into place if you are unaware. They've now been in full effect for about 1.5 years, maybe 2 years now. MMA and breakfast, meat alternate is MMA. Schools can now offer your meat alternates at breakfast in addition to or in place of your whole grain rich requirement. Making sure that you are planning accordingly, that it's purposeful, right? Vegetables in breakfast, schools can now offer vegetables in place of fruit at breakfast. So they must offer vegetables of different subgroups. So, however, you can't just have potatoes every single day and not serve any fruit. It doesn't work like that. You have to have a variety, right? That's what we're pushing here throughout these meal patterns. And then your beans, peas, and lentils in lunch. Legumes that are being credited as MMA can now also count towards the weekly vegetable subgroup requirement. Okay, you cannot double dip, as we would say, in the day of. So if you have, say, refried beans and you are counting that as your meat alternate, it does not also count as your vegetable for that day. But you can put the amount towards the weekly subgroup requirement. So say you have a bean and cheese burrito, you're using that MMA or the refried beans in that burrito for MMA, right? You need to have some other vegetable that's being offered with it for the day, but the beans can count towards that as well as your MMA for the week. Okay. If you have any questions about this, please reach out to your assigned specialist for any further information. And also NSLP Central has great resources. As a reminder, meal pattern and nutritional quality, your findings in this area are going to be subject to fiscal action, right? This is reimbursable meals. If reimbursable meals are not being served, then you should not be claiming them, right? It's dependent upon students' eligibility status as well as a reimbursable meal. So if we have findings here, it's going to be subject to fiscal action because it means non-reimbursable meals are happening. Okay, extensive findings in this area may qualify you as high risk moving forward, right? This means you don't have production records, so you can't justify any reimbursable meals that are happening. You're going to be high risk, right? Because you have zero documentation to justify any of the claim that reimbursable meals were served, right? This is kind of what we're looking at. Again, we will identify this to you as we go throughout our process, as we're looking through documentation. If we're seeing anything that may become high risk, if it's anything that is egregious or extensive, we will identify that to you as we go throughout our process and we will let you know. There should not be any shock and awe as we close our on-site portion of the administrative review, right? Again, that communication is going to be back and forth. So if you see that your assigned specialist and your lead reviewer is emailing you, they're calling you, email back, read those emails, answer the phone call. If you can't answer the phone call, call back, okay? Communication is key for a successful administrative review. All right, questions, comments, concerns. I now can finally take a drink. My dry mouth.
So on that milk stuff where we haven't like written more information there,
Okay,
do we go back and fix that or just move forward?
move
And
forward,
fix that.
move forward. So,
I mean, my milk's the same, but it's just not written as descriptive as what it should have been, I guess. But I just learned that today just now, so.
move forward. That's what we're asking for. We don't want you to recreate documents because that's technically fraud.
Just adding it.
So we're just throwing that information out there, right? Please do not recreate documents. That is called fraud. Okay, that's illegal. We don't do that, right? If you were finding something out new today and you're like, oh my gosh, we haven't been doing this and we should do it, just do it moving forward. None of your administrative reviews are open right now. Technically, they're very close. We have a couple opening up in a couple of days, but right, none are open right now. So just start today, move forward. Okay, start tomorrow, move forward. Maybe not the day after that. It's either today or tomorrow. Start and fix it and move forward. That's what we're asking. Okay. Also have a phone call again with your assigned specialist. If you are unsure of anything, please do it now before your review is open. Just as an FYI, once your review is open, we do have to document everything. So if you're not on your own, we're still here for you. But right, if it's disclosed that something is not in compliance, right, we have to write that down. We have to ensure that you're going to do corrective action to fix it, right? Also, anything that you talk with us, we're going to probably put down as technical assistance just because we're keeping a record of all the information that we're providing to you. Okay, so that it's just that clear, open communication. Okay, makes sense? Right. Any questions online? No, none. Didn't want to give me a longer break to take more drinks, rude. They're also like, we have now been online for an hour and I am exhausted and tired. Staring at a screen hurts my eyes. I get it. All right, we're going into resource management or your financial management of your nonprofit school food service account. Say that 10 times fast. Dare ya. For those of you online and that are muted, you can try and do that while I continue to talk. It's really hard. All right, but with that being said, we're going to look at the management of your food service account. We're going to look and talk about paid lunch equity, which again, the state agency does for you every year, your non-program food revenue, and then also looking at indirect cost. So the first part of resource management is looking at management of your food service account. Okay, the first thing we look at is allowable costs. Are any items found unallowable? If they are found unallowable by the state agency, it will result in a transfer of funds. What that means is if we find that you've purchased something, it's an unallowable to the program, or if it is an equipment purchase that is over the threshold and did not get state agency approval, that technically is an unallowable cost. And while it is kind of considered fiscal action, what we're looking at is a transfer of funds from a general fund, like the school general fund, into your food service account. We, as a state agency, are not asking you to transfer money to us. It's just showing that to that account it is unallowable, so you need to know another source of funds to pay for it. So you're going to transfer that fund into it. Again, once we find this, we will let you know. We'll talk about where the breakdown was, right, and see what we can do to fix it. There was a question.
Can you explain PLE and is it needed for provision 2 applications?
All right, we will explain PLE or paid lunch equity here in a second. We're gonna get finished through this management of food service account and then I'll discuss it. And then if you still have questions, I'll check in with Isabella on that one. So hold on for just a moment. Okay, With net cash resource or net cash requirement, what that means is your 3 months expenditures. Because you are a nonprofit, because you are a public entity, right? You are not allowed to have more than your average of 3 months expenditures in your bank account. What that means, right, for your food service account. If you are found in non-compliance, it's going to result in a spend down plan. So it doesn't mean that you're going to have to give any money back to the state agency. What that means is we're going to ask you a plan on how you're going to spend down that money to get into compliance of your 3 month expenditures. Okay, with that being said, we do understand that inflation is a thing. It's real. Food costs have gone up. Unfortunately, we all feel it in all facets of our life, right? I see it when I go to Costco every week. Man, Costco, right? It hurts. It hurts my wallet. Just as I'm sure food is really hurting your nutrition accounts right now. Okay, with that being said, please look at where your balance is out. Figure out if you do have an expenditure or an excess of that 3 months. So it's over net cash resources is what we call that. That's the terminology with the 7 CFR 210. If you are over that, please notify your specialist right now and a reason as to why you are over. So there is reasonable items of why you're saving some of that money. One may be your district is going to be opening up a new school and you have to pay for an all new kitchen, right? You have to get all of the equipment and appliances, right? You have to figure out more food that next year, right? And there's a reason behind having more funds in your account. Okay, that is reasonable and we can waive that requirement if you have an agreement with us as a state agency. If you are notifying us, look, I have an excess of funds. I recognize I have an excess of funds, but it's for this purpose. Okay. You're going to want to communicate that with your specialist. So please go look at your accounts this week. Notify your specialist ahead of time if you are in excess and start working out that spend down plan. And then we can get that approved so that you can still hold on to that excess of funds. Now, I know, again, we talked about food cost, right? And many have established over the last couple of years with their excess of funds of, I really like to hold on to this excess of funds because food is expensive. And I am recognizing and realizing that reimbursement is not enough. It is no longer sustainable. That's why I haven't spent down and bought new equipment. That's why I haven't given raises to my staff because I know I'm going to need those funds to purchase food for this year and the next year with the rising cost if reimbursement isn't going to go up with it, right? Again, the purpose behind this is that you're just not a dragon hoarding all your money. Okay, you're not like a dragon in your cave and being like gold, right? That's what we're looking at. Nobody read fantasy. Nope. Okay, got it. I got very excited about my being a gold hoarding dragon. Rude.
There's no
I
gold.
now feel very embarrassed by myself, but it's
There's no
cool.
gold. That's the
There's no gold. They're like, it's a number in an account somewhere. I don't know that there's gold.
There's no gold. Hold on.
But essentially what we're looking at, right, is that you're just not hoarding your money, right, to be profitable because you are a school, you are nonprofit, right? You want to be sustainable. So that's what we're looking at here, okay? Making sure that you're tracking your expenditures and your revenues. We're going to ask for a general ledger of the food service account when we open up your review. And again, we want to look at your expenditures and revenues. So your complete look. We also look at the prior year because we need to look at an entire year's worth of information. So we are going to be looking at last year's documentation, last year's funding. Okay, so we will ask for a general ledger for last school year of your expenditures and revenues. Looking at your equipment purchases, are you following processes and procedures correctly? Is it on the pre-approved list and under the threshold? If it is on the pre-approved list and over the threshold of $25,000, you still need to reach out to state agency for approval for that. If that does not happen, it's considered an unallowable cost, just as a heads up. And then also making sure that you have internal controls. Okay, not everybody has access to your funds and can spend it whenever they want to spend it, right? You have training that happens with individuals. You know what allowable costs are to our program, kind of all of that. All right, paid lunch equity. What paid lunch equity is a federal requirement to the National School Lunch Program. What this looks like is we as a state agency do this for you every single year because we are kind and gracious individuals. No? Okay, that's fine. I would like to believe that. But with that being said, what it looks like is it's this requirement is ensuring, okay, thanks guys. Thanks Brock, thanks Glenn. I'll put positive notes on your administrative review. Just kidding. I don't know. I can't actually do that, but it sounds good. But with that said, is we're just ensuring that you're charging your students, the paid students, the proper amount, and that you're not utilizing federal reimbursement to offset those costs. Now, honestly, the reason why we do it here at the state agency for you guys is because Utah has state reimbursement, or liquor tax as it's also known. And because it's such a large amount, our paid lunch equity is kind of like, meh, it doesn't really matter because you get so much reimbursement from us with the state that's able for you to offset your costs. We actually, in the state of Utah, have some of the lowest paid lunch pricing in the nation. And that's partly because of our state reimbursement. If you were unaware and you did not pay attention to our school year kickoff, where our director, Kim Loveland, talked about it, we are starting off at 75 cents for a lunch. So that's where we're at with starting off with state reimbursement. Now, if everybody gets really excited and purchases more alcohol throughout the state of Utah, that could go up. So those of you that partake, feel free to partake more in a healthy manner. Just saying. Also, you can gift it to friends too, even if you don't partake, and gift it to the friends that do partake and say for the kids. A bottle of wine here and there. Just saying, it comes back to your programs. You're doing good. With that being said, but because you get so much, yeah!
It's that hockey team, that's what did
I
it.
appreciate, oh, yes, it's the Mammoths.
That's what did it.
All right. So, because you get so much reimbursement, you don't actually have to charge that difference between your paid federal reimbursement and free reimbursement. That's what paid lunch equity is actually looking at, is whatever that difference is you're supposed to be charging for paid lunch. But again, you have so much of that state reimbursement that you can influx it and offset the cost for your households and your families, which is fantastic. With that, what we do at the state agency is there is waivers that have been posted or memos every year about paid lunch equity. And if you are in a positive balance, so if your food service account is even just $1 in your account, you are technically a positive account. Thereby, you don't have to do the paid lunch equity tool. So what happens is via that date that they provide with each year in that memo. So as of for this current school year, we are utilizing June 30, 2025. So I pulled up everybody's financials that report to the Utah State Board of Education. I looked at the financials and was like, great, if you're positive, I'm automatically giving you that waiver so that we don't have to go through the rigmarole of paperwork for you to identify that you're not actually charging the amount you should be, quote unquote, but you're using your state reimbursement to offset that cost. Okay, so if you were positive, it came out in a memo or it came out in the newsletter indicating that if you had a positive account, you were already given that waived. If you did not, you would have received a Qualtrics survey from myself to fill out information for me to fill out the paid lunch equity tool for you. And we would have had some back and forth, and then you would have saved that in your documentation if you had to. Okay. So if you're unsure of that, you can ask your assigned specialist. We have a list of everybody that had it. I think there was like 5 people that had to do paid lunch equity. If you are provision 2, Even in a base year, you do not have to do paid lunch equity because you are not charging students. Same with CEP, because you are non-pricing programs, you are not charging students. This is only for pricing programs and it only looks at lunch.
That's for last year?
Yes.
Okay.
We will look at it for last year's documentation. So if you were CEP in provision last year, you will not have PLE because you didn't have to. You're non-pricing. So this is only for pricing programs. Okay. These questions will actually be filled out in the administrative review by your state agency specialist, by your lead reviewer. So you kind of don't really have to worry about these questions. To be honest, we just want you aware of what is happening, what the requirement is. And when you see somebody answer the questions for you, you're going to be like, I don't know what happened here. And you're going to be like, your state agency Ferry took care of it for you, but only in this section. So, all right. So, non-program food revenue. Oh, did I answer the question? Just double checking. The person that had the question about PLE, did I answer it for you?
Yes, she said yes.
Perfect. As I'm like hunched over like a raptor, I'm like, did I answer it?
So you're saying if I didn't receive any email from you guys about it, that means?
Yes, if you did not receive an email with an Excel spreadsheet that says paid lunch equity tool, that means you had received that waiver. Okay. It came also through a newsletter. So you should probably, you need to go find that newsletter for your documentation indicating that you received the waiver. If you are unsure, talk to your assigned specialist before your review opens.
I haven't met her.
We can introduce
somewhere.
you after. Okay. All right. Non-program food revenue tool. We're making sure that it's complete and correct. This is an annual requirement. Okay, this needs to be done every single year, not just when you have an administrative review. Even though I know the majority of you only do this when you have an administrative review. Slap on the wrist for that. Okay, but not really, because then that would be assault and I would lose my job. So shame, shame. Wag of my finger. Okay. You have to do this every single year. What this is you're looking at your meal costing, your documentation. The requirement says that you have to have at least 5 consecutive days used for this revenue tool. If you do more than that, awesome. If you don't, at least 5 consecutive days. Okay, you need all that documentation. You need to have the USDA revenue tool that you have filled out indicating that you are in compliance of your ratio, meaning you are charging enough for your non-program foods, right? You're charging more than what it costs you. That's what that's looking at essentially. Why this is a requirement is it's making sure that you are not using any federal reimbursement funds to offset costs for like adult meals, right? A second meal for a student, any a la carte items. That's what we're ensuring here. There is a policy memo that was released about a year ago that indicates if you do a la carte milk or juice only, then you do not have to do a revenue tool, but you do have to be aware of this memo. We will ask you if this memo applies, and you will need to tell me what the policy memo number is. It is located on NSLP Central, so please be aware of that. Go look at that memo. Also, if you do adult meals only, and you have utilized the adult meal price calculator, then this also is waived. You do not have to do the non-program food revenue tool. Okay, so please read that policy memo. If you have any questions about it, again, contact your assigned specialist. Speaking of adult meal prices, we're going to look that those are calculated and that they're correct. This is also an annual requirement. You can utilize the SFA's meal costing, so you can do your actual own meal costing by utilizing your ingredients, how much it actually costs to make the meal, and then determine your price, but you need to show us that documentation of how that was done. Or you can use the adult meal costing tool. That is a USDA tool. It's an Excel spreadsheet. It's available and has been updated for this school year with the current reimbursement prices. So you can draw or pull that down from NSLP Central. But again, we are looking at last year. So you can fix it if you haven't done it and do it for this year. But if you didn't do it last year, we're still going to find you in non-compliance, and we're going to have to make you do a process to make sure that this happens, that you're always going to be in compliance, that it doesn't happen again. Okay. Also, we're going to look at if you have any catering costs, and are you charging enough for how much it's costing you? If you are purchasing for other departments, this is considered catering. So for instance, if you are purchasing for your CTE department, because it's cheaper if you're buying in bulk and for a whole, as like a whole school or a whole district, you need to have some type of invoice process of making sure that that other program is paying your program back for purchasing those products. Okay. So for instance, let's say you have a cooking class, like with your CTE, say it's like Pro Start or something to that effect. And they're like, hey, can you purchase this 50-pound bag of flour because it's going to be cheaper for you to purchase it than for me on my own, because you're already purchasing, I don't know, a pallet, right? I just need one bag. You're going to know what that price is for that bag, and then you're going to charge their department that price of the bag. So we're going to need to see that transfer of funds happening, so into your account, okay? It's just whatever that process is. Or if you have actual catering, obviously we're going to look at that documentation. Now, if you are found in non-compliance, this is going to be a type of fiscal action. It's just a transfer of funds are going to occur. Okay. So what that means, is kind of similar with unallowable costs. We're going to see a transfer from your general fund into the food service account. Okay. That's what we're looking at. A non-federal source of funds needs to replace those funds, If you're not charging enough for your a la carte items or whatever it may be, if you didn't charge that CTE director for that 50-pound bag of flour and we find that, we're going to need to see a transfer of funds happen to make your account whole. Okay, that's what that looks like. Indirect costs, this is for those of you that do indirect costs, not everybody does. But if you do have indirect costs that are charged to your account, then we're determining if those indirect costs are charged correctly. So that means, are you using the indirect cost rate that has been determined by USBE Financial Operations? If you are found in non-compliance, again, a transfer of funds is going to occur. Again, that just means from a general fund transferring in because you overcharged the account. Okay. For those of you that are private institutions, indirect costs must be approved by USBE SNP before they can be charged. So if you are a private institution, you need to be talking to your assigned specialist about indirect costs if you would like to charge indirect costs to the food service account. And if you are charging indirect costs and have not gotten state approval, that is obviously unallowable and in non-compliance, and we will ask you to pay the food service account back. Okay, again, we are looking at last year's information. All right, so findings in resource management, errors found in the following areas are going to result in a required transfer of funds. Just as a general reminder, I don't want any surprises happening about transfer of funds. So is anything with like allowable costs, equipment purchases, indirect costs, and non-program food revenue. Okay. Questions? You're moving through this so fast and I'm so excited. No questions online? Perfect. All right, moving forward. Now our general areas. Okay, I would say these are a little bit less scary if you have a finding here, still in non-compliance, but generally speaking, not involving your money. Okay, so if you're going to have an error, you're gonna want an error in the general areas. Okay, Also, you're gonna have an error no matter what. I've only had one perfect administrative review in the 9 years I have been here. So if you want to be my second, that would be fantastic. But generally speaking, there's been so many changes, you're gonna have an error somewhere. And if you're gonna have one, please, in the general areas, because then it doesn't deal with money. So your general areas, as a reminder, is looking at your civil rights, local wellness policy, smart snacks, Buy American, professional standards, food safety, record keeping, outreach, and then other federal programs. Civil rights, we're making sure that you have your Injustice for All posters displayed, that you have a complaint procedure that is specific to the nutrition program. Okay, your LEA or institution may have a civil right complaint procedure, right? And oftentimes we see procedures that talk about sexual harassment and other areas of civil rights. And we're like, great, I'm glad you have that procedure, but how is this specific to the child nutrition programs? You have to have a complaint procedure specific to our programs. Now, if it's added paragraphs to the LEA or institution's procedure, that's perfectly fine. It doesn't need to be like a completely separate, but there needs to be some specifics about our nutrition program. We're looking at, is there a disparity of services? What that means is, right, is that it's equal access to all. Okay, you're not dividing students by ethnicity to each table, right? That is disparity of services. Right? You're not identifying to students what student is free, what student is reduced, and what student has to pay for lunch, right? That you're being discreet about it, kind of situations, that's what we're looking at. We're not playing favorites, right? And then we're also looking at your special diets procedure and your documentation. Okay, again, I kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier, right? Offer versus serve cannot be used for anybody that has special diets. You need to follow the procedure and have proper documentation if a student needs anything changed because of, whatever may happen. So if they're lactose intolerant, right, you need a document signed by a medical authority stating that they can't have anything with lactose in it, and then what those alternatives can be and what alternatives are approved for that student. Okay, we have templates available online on NSLP Central. You don't have to use our templates, but just make sure that you have the proper information that you need to provide safe and equitable meals to those students. Okay. Another thing maybe that has come up in the past is if students have like 504s and IEPs, which is individual education plans. Right. And sometimes this isn't necessarily communicated with the nutrition department. I would kind of just talk with your school counselor about, hey, are there any students with any 504s or IEPs that may affect their mealtime? So this could also be something to the effect of a student is on the spectrum. So they're on the autism spectrum, and it might be a texture issue. So there's something in their 504 or IEP about it. As long as you have that proper information and something assigned by a medical authority, you can use that documentation to also serve as your special diet information and documentation. So you can share that information back and forth. I say this because I have a couple people close to my heart that have texture issues, and they have ARFIDs, so it's really difficult to get that individual to eat. And so it's part of their 504, and that's been communicated with their nutrition department, right? And because it's signed by a doctor, has all the information, that works. Okay, so bless my sweet person that I love so much, that's dear to my heart, eats the same thing every single day because that's their disability, and that's okay. So I just want to throw that out there as well. It is in regulation that is also allowable to use the 504 and IEPs, again, as long as it's signed with medical authority information. Okay. Local wellness policy, we're going to make sure that it meets your federal requirements, that you have all the documentation that you need to keep, and that a committee is established. If you are unaware of what those federal requirements are of what needs to be in your local wellness policy, please go to NSLP Central. You guessed it. Kind of like the Bible for Utah, if you will, of child nutrition programs. If you're not a religious individual, whatever book that you go to the most? Right now, mine would be anything that's Sarah J. Maas. Like, praise be, you know? It was a joke, guys. It's fine.
I laughed.
I was like, okay, thanks. I appreciate it. Maybe some fantasy readers in here. That's good. Okay, so with that, you're going to make sure that your local wellness policy is posted publicly. So it's on a website, it's on board docs, whatever that looks like for you and your agency. And then making sure that your triennial assessment is complete and those results are posted. What that looks like is that there's a public invitation to participate in an assessment. There's an assessment of all sites in your SFA about how they're doing on their local wellness policy. That's what an assessment looks like. There are several tools that are already prepared and created for you to utilize. One of them that is very well known is the WellSat. You can create your own, but really what that looks like with your triennial assessment is that every 3 years with your local wellness policy, you got to go into every single one of your schools of like, how are they doing on meeting the goals of the local wellness policy? Just a second. So we're going to need to look at all of that information and documentation on how you did your assessment of all the sites. And then what the decision is from the committee about the policy after that assessment. So do you need to adjust your assessment or do you need to adjust your policy, or the policy is great, your schools just aren't following it super great. So what you need to do to implement it better, right? Kind of stuff like that. That's what we're looking at and making sure that all of that is posted publicly. Okay, question.
I have a couple questions.
Yes.
So with that, in the past, the health department has helped us do that. Is that still okay that they help us do those assessments?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. So if anybody didn't hear, health department has done that in the past. Is that still acceptable? Absolutely, 100%. The health department has been trained in the WellSat tool, so they are a really great resource to utilize if you haven't already.
My next question is, if we are off a little bit on the triannual assessment, we are trying to get back on that plan.
Yeah.
Is that going to be a finding if you're looking at the past, or are you looking at it for this year that we've done it and make sure we're in compliance going forward?
So that's a really great question. So if you have not been on the triennial assessment, I'm going to rephrase to make sure that everybody online can hear, and number two, that I'm understanding correctly. So you have your local wellness policy. You may not have done your assessment triannually, and maybe in 4 years instead of 3. You're trying to get back on track. You have a plan in place of how to do that, and you're currently working on it right now. Is that going to be a finding? Correct? That is the question. Okay. With that being said, it will have been identified as that you were not in compliance. However, if you've already fixed everything and the root cause of why it is a finding, then it's just going to be corrected on site. So it will be documented as such of like, hey, you were in non-compliance, but the state agency and with documentation has already indicated show that they've already fixed this. They put a new process into place so that they prevent from this happening again. And we'll just say corrected on site. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. All right. That is it for local wellness policy. And then we're going to move on to smart snacks. This is any food that is sold to the students during the school day. School day is defined as midnight to 30 minutes after the regular school day ends. Okay. We're looking at your food sale policies. We're looking at your process for your smart snack compliance. So who's in charge? Who's keeping documentation and where? Most oftentimes we're finding non-compliance in vending machines and or school stores that is often run by your CTE department. Okay, you need to identify, hopefully communicate to those individuals of what compliance looks like for smart snacks. Having that supporting documentation that all of the food that is being sold to students is compliant. So that means copy of their labels, of recipes if it's something that's being made in the CTE department and being sold, and then a printout if they're utilizing Smart Snack Calculator to show that compliance. Okay, there needs to be that documentation. Now, this happens often with school principals that oversee the vending machines that are happening in the schools, or the assistant principal, whoever oversees that. they say, oh, the vending machine company has the documentation. Cool, bro. You still need to keep documentation on site to establish that they're not lying to you, right? Treat them like the Russians. You trust and verify. Okay? You need that documentation to indicate that it is Smart Snack compliant. Okay? Also, we look at your exempted fundraisers for Smart Snacks. So there is a CTE fundraiser exemption. What that looks like is a CTE teacher will fill out a form that is online. It gets submitted to the state agency, which is actually me, and I'll go through it and see if they are approved or not. What they can be approved for is up to 10 days per term or trimester of selling items that are non-compliant to Smart Snacks standards, but they have to have a reason why. Is it integral to part of their business class, right? Of the marketing or whatever it may be. If it's a pro start, right? Of the difference between utilizing beans as a fat in a cookie recipe or brownie recipe versus traditional lard. I don't know. I'm making stuff up as we go. Right. But anyways, they can be approved up to that. If they are approved, what will happen is they will receive an approval notification from their application, and I will have forwarded to you as the food service director as courtesy to let you know what's happening at your schools with CTE exempted fundraisers. If you have not received anything from myself of an approved CTE fundraiser, that means it's not happening. They haven't applied for it. So most likely they're in non-compliance. Okay. There's also your non-CTE fundraiser exemption. So under board rule, every site at an LEA can have up to 3 fundraisers a year that sell items that are Smart Snack or that are non-compliant with Smart Snack standards. It can be up to 5 days. And that is an internal process with you all, right? So there should be some type of process where they're communicating to you as a director about a site doing something like that. The most common one we see is like candy grams at Valentine's Day that the SBOs are running, right? That you can buy a sucker and send it to your cute little crush, you know? And as someone that never got a candy gram, I hated that fundraiser. It's fine. Don't worry
I would
about
have
it.
sent you one.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. For those of you at home, somebody here said that they would send me one, and I appreciate that. You can't send one to me now though, because then that would be considered a bribe, and that is inappropriate. And oh, yes. Christy, I bet you also got it. Oh, Gwen, it's okay. I'm a full grown adult now and I have a super great spouse, so it's okay. And my spouse was pretty great to me on my anniversary a couple weeks ago, so just saying. We're fine. I grew into a strong, capable human.
So
All right, question here first, and then we have a question online. So yes.
Those need to be applied for through you as well, the non-CET fundraisers?
No, so the question was the non-CTE fundraisers also need to apply to the state agency, and that is a no. That is an internal process. So CTE fundraisers, that is state agency goes to me. That's your CTE department filling them out. Your non-CTE fundraiser is an internal process. So we have templates available on NSLP Central that you can utilize for people to fill
It's
out.
just so I'm aware of what's going on.
Yep, just so that you are aware and you're keeping track of how many fundraisers are happening at that school and are they compliant or non-compliant, right? They know the process. So if you have had any fundraisers, we'll ask you. And then if you have anything of like internal process of like, yes, it only lasted 4 days. This is what they sold. It was fine kind of thing. All right, online question.
Is this per site or per district?
The non-CTE fundraiser exemption is per site. So you have 3 per site. Okay. It is also non-exclusive to CTE. So technically, like your high schools that have CTE departments and like a school store that's run by like the business classes could be running their 10-day exempted fundraiser. And then also you could have the 3 separate non-CTE fundraisers at a site. Okay. It's all about record keeping here. Okay.
Another question.
Yes.
but club fundraisers do not apply.
I need more clarification about club fundraisers. The intention is if it is food sold during the school day for the intention of the child to eat it at the time of purchase, needs to be Smart Snack compliant. So for instance, if it is, say the cheerleaders are doing a cookie dough fundraiser and they're selling cookie dough, right? That is not intended to be eaten at the time of purchase. They may do it because I was a naughty kid that did when I received my cookie dough, but because what child can resist? But the intention isn't there, right? So the intention behind also matters. So it's food to be consumed during the school day, like bought and consumed during the school day. Okay, so okay, I got a thumbs up. Sounds like I answered the question. Perfect. All right, we're going to move on to professional standards. We look at director hiring requirements, so making sure that the director meets the requirements for the LEA and size, or that there's an approved waiver for that situation if they didn't meet requirements. Also that they've completed their food safety training. We're looking at all staff training requirements. Have you done your annual civil rights training? Are annual hours met for each employee? Now, we do understand we are visiting you throughout the year, right? And you have up to the entire school year to complete your hours. If you have not met your hours or your staff has not met your hours yet for the school year, we're just going to ask you what your plan is. Do you have scheduled trainings throughout the year so that they will eventually meet those annual training hours by the end of the school year? That's what we're looking at, right? If they haven't met those annual hours yet, what is the plan in place so that they do meet those annual hours? We're also going to look at all the documentation that is kept for that. So what is your tracking process and documentation? One thing that we notice often is that there isn't specific, that the specific criteria required on that documentation isn't there. So essentially, you need to look up what is required for documentation purposes and what you need to keep. Essentially, it's the employee's first to last name, what their position is, how many hours that they're required to take, and then all the training that's set forth with that. So training codes, training areas, how long the training was, the total hours, all of that. Okay. That information can also be found on NSLP Central. USDA has an online tool that you can utilize for that. For every employee, they can keep their own records and then provide that to you. You can do it for them, whatever that may look like. It's a pretty easy, slick tool. If you have something in your own system, so you're like a large LEA, and you have your own training records, make sure that if it doesn't have the required information that is needed, that's somewhere, if you have like an attendance log of like a huge training that you have with all of your staff, that at least has like the coded information for professional standards and areas so that it can help like document that information. We do understand, right, that when you are forced to use a system by your district or LEA, it's not going to contain everything that you need specific for child nutrition. So finding another way to kind of just have that information available, that's what we're looking for all together as a whole. Okay, there was a question online.
Do food trucks fall into the category of getting approval to serve on site?
Absolutely, food trucks do. We actually had this conversation internally yesterday. This is quite funny. So that's going to fall into your competitive foods program or regulation, right? Anything that is sold in competition with your lunch program and your breakfast program has to meet Smart Snack requirements, and it can't be in direct competition with your programs if you're operating National School Lunch Program, which all of you are. Okay. Now, I understand and realize that LEAs can have a work around this where they park across the street, so they're technically not on campus, and unfortunately, there's nothing you can do about that. But if they are parked on campus, it either needs to be part of a CTE fundraiser that has been approved by the state office, or you've had a real good conversation about how they're meeting compliance. Okay. Yes,
So if they are on site during our meal times, this is an issue.
it is an issue. Yes. I know. It's not a fun one because I know as food service directors, you only have so much call over what happens at your sites. You are dealing with principals, you're dealing with superintendents, you're dealing with business administrators, you're dealing with CTE individuals, and every single one of those people hate smart snack requirements. I understand that. As somebody that gets yelled at by their own brother at Thanksgiving meal every year because he doesn't get his nachos from the school store and complains about smart snack compliance, I feel you with every fiber of my being. It is those conversations. Now, I understand you are going to want bite to this with your principal of you're like, what's the repercussions? How can I push back to my principal or my superintendent about this? What's going to happen if I'm found in non-compliance about this? Now, this is where it can get difficult because technically there's no fiscal action, right? That is tied to this. Therefore, they're like, oh, whatever, it doesn't cost us money. Meh. Right? It's frustrating. It does cost us money though, right? Because that fun that money is going elsewhere and not to our programs. They're nearly not as healthy as meals as our programs are, right? And it's also you're kind of dealing with like access and accessibility for all students and involved. Now, if you're found in non-compliance, this is what's going to happen. You are going to get corrective action for this. And unfortunately, it goes on your report and it's your responsibility because it falls under National School Lunch Program. You then can push this corrective action to the said principal or superintendent that says, hey, non-compliance, this has to get fixed. Now, one thing I'm going to stress really hard this year, and also I stressed it very hard in your homework assignment of timeline 10-minute video that you should have watched beforehand. If you didn't, again, go back, please watch that. All corrective action has to be done SFA wide. It is no longer just site specific. Okay, that was found in a management evaluation this year from USDA on our practices as a state agency. There is a line in 7 CFR 210 that specifically talks about with administrative review corrective action that it must be SFA wide. So if one of your schools is found in non-compliance, that means all of your schools now has to indicate and show that they are in compliance of smart snack requirements. If this is not done on time and by the due date, we hold funds. Okay? That's where the bite starts happening of sure, it's nutrition funds, but when you're a large LEA and it's $1 million a month or more, your business administrator is going to go, we got lots of food costs we need to pay for, and we're not receiving our money. This is a problem, right? And if you're spending money and don't have it, money's got to come from somewhere, right? And if you're in the negative, that money's got to come back per regulation and make a whole. So where is that money going to come from? If it's CTE's fault, maybe you talk to them and say, maybe your funds can pay for this.
Yay.
Does that give you bite?
Yay.
I think it gives you a little bit of bite, right? If you have problems with your administrator about this, and if you don't feel super as confident about having that conversation, please have them call me. I am more than happy to have that conversation with them. All right. Question?
So if
Mute yourself. Okay, so if
they are serving waffle love, this is not in compliance.
absolutely not in compliance if they are serving waffle love. No.
And then we had a comment from Brock, things are going to get crazy.
Things are going to get crazy. Things are going to get very crazy.
Opened a can of worms.
I know. Open the can of worms every single year. This is a conversation we get to have every single year. Every district, and especially CTE, hates me. I'm okay to carry that load for you. I'll just put that little chip on my shoulder for you and carry it around. You can blame me. It's fine. Feel free. You know, just is what it is. It's federal requirements. I didn't write this. So, okay. All right. I know that we had gone off because of the questions. So any questions for professional standards? I didn't think so in terms of what that. Okay. Hiring standards, just as a highlight, right? Here's your hiring standards for nutrition directors per your student enrollment size of your LEA. So we'll just double check this. Basically, we kind of just like ask for a resume, or we look at your hiring documents to make sure that you met this. Your required training hours. This is your required training hours, how many that everybody needs to do. So if you're a director, at least 12 hours. Manager is 10 hours. All of our staff that is not a director or manager and that works over 20 hours a week is 6 hours. And then part-time is under 20 hours is your 4 hours of education or training. All right, we're gonna look at your food safety when we're on site. Oh yeah, sorry.
I'm so sorry. I just thought of a question.
You're good.
So is that training we receive, not necessarily training we prepare and give, right?
Training you receive.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, food safety. We look at your HACCP binder, your food safety plan. Make sure that it's specific to your site and that that location is available to all staff on site in the kitchen. If it's online, that is perfectly acceptable as long as your staff knows how to get there and how to review the food safety binder. And then also if you have a warehouse storage facility, we look at that of how and where food is stored. Is it separate from everything else? You're not storing chemicals by your food in the warehouse, right? Kind of all the things, simple, basic. Buy American, we look at, does the SFA have a tracking process to meet that 10% cap requirement? Last year was the first year that you had a cap of, had to be 10% or less of the items that you purchased, being non-domestic. So now that we have had a full entire year of this, we are going to look at your documentation for last year. So did you have a tracking process to ensure that you met that 10% cap? If you did not meet that 10% cap, did you have an accommodation that you were approved for by our state office? You would have received documentation for that, an approval letter from our coordinators about that accommodation. So you'll need to have that in effect. We will also look at how you are moving forward with that to meet that 10% cap this year. We're going to look at, do you maintain documentation for all non-domestic products that are purchased? Do you have a reason why you're utilizing those? Is it on the FAR list? So like, right, pineapple is not grown here domestically in large enough quantities for industry. Bananas, mandarin oranges, those are our big three that we often see. It's on the FAR list. But do you have documentation, and are you at a, you're not serving it like every single day, right? Also variety, that you're using more domestic items on the food service line. And then also that you have a process for receiving and reporting non-domestic products that are not expected, okay? So that makes sure that you have a process. If your kitchen managers are the ones that are taking inventory when you get a delivery, that they're double checking of like, is this a domestic product or a non-domestic product? And if it's a non-domestic product, were you notified that it was a non-domestic product? So did your producer, whoever you had a contract with, so say I'm going to use Cisco for everybody knows who Cisco is, right? So Cisco, you ordered through them. They said all of your fresh produce is going to be domestic produce. It's delivered. You find out that your tomatoes are from Mexico and they didn't notify you. What is your process for that? Your process should be notifying them of like, why do I have a non-domestic tomato? And then they need to provide that information to you. I'm not saying that you don't need to receive that, because understandably so, you're going to need tomatoes for whatever it be. Maybe you're making pico, like, right, for your tacos. Not saying you have to like not take it, but you do need to be notified. You need to have that follow-up of, why did I receive this? And it's, oh, cost, or growth in America was terrible because we had a late freeze or an early freeze, kind of just like all of that stuff. You just need to follow up with all of that information and have that documentation intact. Now, I will say if it is produce from DOD, so you're participating in FDP or USDA foods, and you receive produce as part of your DOD contract and it's non-domestic, you cannot receive that. You need to send that back and then you need to immediately report that to our office. That's Melissa Cowder right now. Wendy has left. Wendy also had a really great opportunity. She's now a food service director up in Idaho. Congrats, Wendy. Good for her. So we only have Melissa Cowder right now on our USDA foods team. We're trying to find a replacement. But if it's DOD, non-domestic, you have to make sure that your kitchen managers do not accept it. They send it back and report that to Melissa. Okay, that is the caveat to that. Question here.
So if we are tracking it and we're under our 10% and say, I don't know, we get a product in that's non-domestic and that puts us over our 10%, but we are following our process to get that information, is that going to be okay?
That's a really great question. And honestly, Candace, I can't answer that for you. I'm going to need to follow up with USDA on that one. For those of you, if you couldn't hear, the question was you're under your 10%, you're tracking, you have all your documentation. You were told that you were going to get a domestic product. You actually receive a non-domestic product. You're going to use it and it ends up pushing you over that 10%. What's going to happen to you is in compliance? Is it going to be non-compliant? We have a reasoning why, what's going to happen. And I don't have the answer for that right now because this is still pretty new. So I'm going to take that question, push it up to USDA with our regional office. Fun fact, we actually have regional coming down to us, up to us. So they're from Texas, so up. Coming up to us in a couple of weeks, we're actually gathering all of the states in our region to talk about administrative reviews and compliance and how we do that. And one of the topics that we're talking about is Buy American. So I'll probably have that answer, I'm going to say in a month. So, okay. Was there a question online? Okay.
Yes, question for this. I thought fruit did not count.
What do you mean by I thought fruit does not count? Are you meaning fruit in the fresh fruit and vegetable program grant? Or are you saying just fruit in general for breakfast and lunch? Waiting for a response. And take a sip.
Is that the only time FFVP? If you want to come off mute and explain or give more background, that would be helpful.
Okay, it was my understanding that fruit didn't count, but I guess maybe I misunderstood it, and it's just the FFVP fruit that doesn't count. Is that correct? As
Correct.
the 10%? So
Yeah.
really just if we serve bananas once a week and we never serve pineapple, we're probably still okay then.
Probably. I
All
mean,
fruit in general. Because I wasn't aware that it was all fruit in general.
yeah,
I'm
it's
kind of confused
anything.
on that.
Yeah, it's anything that is being served for breakfast and lunch has to be in under that 10% cap for non-domestic items. So I don't know how much in terms of like purchasing of what that would look like if you're serving bananas once a week. I would assume you're going to be okay. I can't guarantee that because I don't know what finances look like and, you know, the amount that you're spending on domestic products versus non-domestic products. The only time that we would say that is not part of the 10% cap is your fresh fruit and vegetable program grant if you're participating in that. Those items don't go into your 10% cap.
Okay, so then I really need to watch my fruit because my other commodities and stuff that I use, 99% of them are made in, in America. I don't seek out like abstract things and I'm on contract with Nicholas to have that. So I'm okay there. It's just the fruit one now I got to be concerned about because I misunderstood that totally because I don't remember which meeting it was because I've been to so many lately. The FFVP, I know I don't have to because you just can't. But, with the way that fruit prices are going on right now and stuff, it's really hard sometimes to get domestic fruit. So that really, I don't know, that's going to be a hard one.
Yeah. So with that being said, and acknowledging that is going to be difficult, especially food pricing going up, right? They
It's
have
insane.
extended, yeah, they have extended the accommodation to this year. You just need to apply for the Buy American accommodation, and it talks about why you're not going to be able to meet that 10% cap. So that's an online survey that again you'll fill out. It should have been sent out in the most recent
Kinda like-
bi-weekly update.
Kind of like the milk one that I had to do. Yeah,
Yes.
it's just like, okay, I know what you're talking about.
Yep.
Yeah, because like apples alone have gone at $10 a case since my summer program since school started. I mean,
Yeah.
they're through the roof right now. It's everything. Everything's through the roof right now. I
Yeah.
hope you guys give us a raise.
You know what? If it was up to me, I would. But unfortunately,
It's
that is the
bad.
federal government. And so here is my pitch to reach out to your local representative and talk about the need as to why federal reimbursement needs to be increased.
It's crazy. It's really, really a struggle this school year.
It is.
Thank
It's
you.
difficult. Yeah, of
I'm going
course.
quiet.
You're good. So yeah, just as a ending to the Buy American piece, the accommodation has been extended for this year. You just need to fill it out again because last year's accommodation was for last year. So again, if you're worried about meeting that 10% cap, what it's going to do is going to ask you, what is your reasoning behind not being able to meet that 10%? And part of that could be cost, right? Availability of product. I know, especially here domestically in Utah, right? There are a lot of orchards that had a late frost or an early frost, late frost, that killed a ton of the produce. So, right, accessibility is lower, so you probably have to go non-domestic, right? Those are reasonings behind it that USDA understands. So that's what those accommodations are for. So just make sure you fill that out and have the proper documentation. Okay. Cool.
A question on the previous slide,
Yes,
another one.
on food safety.
Did you say it could be a digital copy?
Yes, I did. Your HACCP binder or food safety plan can be a digital copy. It has to be accessible to everybody that works in the kitchen. So if it's a digital copy and we go in and ask, where's your HACCP binder or your food safety plan, and your kitchen staff has no idea what we're talking about or where it's located, you're going to be in non-compliance. Okay, it can be digital, but it has to be accessible. Okay. I get it. Paper costs, right? Everything. We're trying to pinch our pennies at this moment. Okay, record keeping. We're going to double check that you're maintaining all of your documentation 3 years plus current year. If your provision CEP base year documentation, we're going to look and make sure that you have that. And then also, if you have any waivers and approval for waivers, that you have that documentation in place. So if you had to do like an emergency meal pattern waiver and you had to fill that out, you have that documentation available. The Buy American accommodation waiver, kind of all of that. Okay. All right. We're moving into outreach. So if you were unaware, you now are aware that you have to do outreach for your school breakfast program and outreach for your seamless summer option. Whether you operate seamless summer or not, you have to notify households about where they could find seamless summer options or summer feeding sites or sun meals, as they like to call them. So this just needs to be completed whether you participate or not. So outreach documentation can look like social media posts. It can look like newsletters, flyers. You just have to prove to us and show us what you did to notify households of participation in finding summer feeding sites. If you had your own seamless summer options, what that document looked like that you sent out to your households of like where your sites were located, times, kind of all of that. Outreach for school breakfast, there's a requirement about notifying your households that that school breakfast is available, what the pricing is for a paid breakfast, kind of all of that information and how to participate in your school breakfast program. Just as a quick reminder about school breakfast, make sure that you are doing alternative breakfast if you meet those standards. So if you are 30% free and reduced or higher, you have to have an alternative method for breakfast and also indicate that, right, that you're outreaching and telling your families about that or your households about that and what that looks like. That could be you are doing traditional breakfast as usual, and then you've extended those hours for like 10 to 15 minutes after the school bell. If you have done that though, that means that there can't be any repercussion to the student, that if they are in and getting breakfast, that there isn't like a repercussion to the student of like tardiness or whatever it may be. That's part of kind of your school policy. So you need to look at how you're operating that alternative style of breakfast. You can still operate traditional if that works for you. You just haven't to have something else that is alternative available. That could also be breakfast in the classroom. That could be second option. So if you're like a junior high or high school, that you have like kiosks in the hallway that they can do like a grab and go and take it into their classroom. If you need any ideas on how to do an alternative breakfast style, please reach out to your assigned specialist and they can help you with that. All right. We are in our closing era of looking at other federal programs. We look at your after-school snack program if you operate. We review your production records and meal pattern documentation. We look at all of your claiming documentation and if you've done your site monitoring within the first 4 weeks of operation of your after-school snack program. Now, anything that shows that they are non-reimbursable snacks, or if you don't have claiming documentation, that will be considered into fiscal action with those findings, just as an FYI, because that involves funding. Your fresh fruit and vegetable program grant, we will observe an FFVP service. We're going to identify if the site advertises program participation for all, and then we're going to just review your documentation. Luckily enough, because of your claiming process with that grant, you're submitting documentation every single month. So FFVP is pretty easy to get through with administrative reviews because Danny in our office is already reviewing all of your invoices every single month for allowable costs, kind of all of that, making sure that you're meeting those standards. So seamless summer option, like I said, if you operate seamless summer option, we have already reviewed you this summer. So that was kind of like your foot in the door, if you will, a toe dipping into the pool of the administrative review. So that's already been completed. If you did not operate seamless summer option last year and you choose to operate seamless summer option next summer, then we will have to observe that service because it's within that time frame of you getting an administrative review, just as an FYI. And then if any of you are operating special milk program, which I don't believe you are, but we will review special milk program and milk service. We'll look at your documentation for that. Findings that could result in fiscal action. As a reminder, after school snack program production records, if you do not have complete production records with all the required information, that could result in fiscal action. After school snack program counting and claiming, if you have errors there. After school snack program meal pattern, if you are not meeting a meal pattern and they are not receiving reimbursable meals or snacks, obviously that's going to be some fiscal action. If there's fresh fruit and vegetable program unallowable costs, there could be some fiscal action with that. Again, Danny looks at that every single month, so I doubt that's going to happen because she'll indicate before she approves that reimbursement from your grant. Seamless summer option meal pattern, seamless summer option production records, and seamless summer option counting and claiming. Now, when it comes to fiscal action with seamless summer option, it is correlated and calculated with your national school lunch program. So if you had any fiscal action from your seamless summer option, whether that be $5, it could be $10, that's going to be added into your national school lunch program fiscal action. Okay. As a reminder about fiscal action, we do have a disregard and it is $600 for each program. That means if you are under $600 for your national school lunch program fiscal action, we will disregard it. We'll say, yeah, that sucks. We've documented it, but we're going to move forward. We're not going to ask for any of that money back. Okay. Same thing with breakfast. If your fiscal action for breakfast is $600, if it's under $600, we will disregard it. We will note how much the fiscal action was, and then we'll let you know we're disregarding it. We're moving forward because you've completed your corrective action and this shouldn't happen again. Okay, again, we will remind all of this to you at our exit conference when we are on site. So again, nothing should be an utmost surprise and shock and awe to you. The only thing about fiscal action I will state is that we cannot assess that, meaning we can't figure out the numbers until your corrective action is complete. Unfortunately, that is part of the process. So until corrective action is complete, we can't give you exact numbers. All right, questions, comments, concerns. We are at the end of our administrative review. We went so fast. We are done an hour early. Anything left? Everybody's like, don't ask a question so that we can go.
Have a comment. Wow.
Okay, before I completely let you go, and while some questions I think might be coming in now, I am going to say, like, if you have done administrative reviews with us in the past, and you've come to this training in the past, we've talked about corrective action. We're shifting this. We're not going to talk about corrective action at all. We found that when we talk about it at the beginning of the school year and you have your review a little bit later on, you kind of forgotten anything that we talked about or that we did as a workshop. So we're actually going to host a different training for corrective action a little bit later in the school year. We will have it available to you virtually. We're toying with the idea of having it just like a recorded video for you to watch to help assist you, and or doing like an online training such as this, or even possibly a module. We're kind of toying with all of those ideas, but we just found it wasn't as successful if you're doing it right now and say your review isn't until March. You're like, cool, I know I talked about it, but it's been a year full of emergency meal pattern waivers that I've had to fill out because my milk didn't show up, or a fire started in my kitchen and I didn't know what to do, or whatever happens throughout the school year. Because, you know, life, right? So with that being said, we're not going to go over corrective action today, but look out for those emails about what we're going to do for corrective action to help support you. And then also at your exit conference, we will have like a link to the video to kind of remind you of how to do corrective action, what that looks like, how to write a plan to move forward. Okay, so that is also why we're ending so early today. Okay, questions from online.
Just to reiterate that the slides and recording will be posted on NSLP Central, and that it will also be sent out in the biweekly update.
Perfect. Thank you. Just in case you didn't hear, this was recorded. Recording will be sent out in the newsletter biweekly update and will be posted on NSLP Central. So you can watch this glorious face all over again. That was a joke. Okay. All right. Well, without further ado, we are done. Have the rest of your day back to you, and good luck. Thanks, everybody. Yay for me. I'm just kidding, because everybody